Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk with me on this Wednesday. What day is it? I don't even know what day it is. Tuesday afternoon. We are coming off of Labor Day, so a little bit different schedule, but a lot to get into on this episode. We're going to talk about our final thoughts from that Marshall win for the Bulldogs, 45-7 victory. What stood out, especially in the days removed, if we've had a chance to rewatch what we liked. What caught our attention. Also talk about some of the other week one scores. We got into a little bit of that on the Saturday episode, but we'll dive a little bit deeper there. And then we'll talk about Georgia's week 2 game against Austin Peay, a Governor's team that's coming off a pretty impressive week 1 win. Share what Kirby Smart and players had to say there. Going to be another fun episode. Hope you guys will stick around. If you're watching this on YouTube, please go subscribe and hang around because this should be another fun episode. And let's get this one going. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk with me on this Tuesday afternoon. And we're time to talk a little bit more about the Georgia Bulldogs. We're going to start this episode by giving our final thoughts on the win over Marshall. Look ahead to the week 2 game against Austin Peay. But we'll also look at some of the other scores, some of the other notable matchups and outcomes from week 1 in the college football season. But we'll jump right into it and go into final thoughts from Georgia Marshall. Georgia won that one 45-7. We did about 45 minutes after the game on Saturday night. Kudos to Ben for hosting that one and getting that one rolling while we went through and did some interviews. But I'll start with you, Ben. We've had a few days removed now from that win for Georgia to start the season. What sort of still sticks with you from that game? Anything that you found interesting or really, keep going back to when it comes to that win?
Well, Henry on YouTube says the Dogs will be national champions once again this year. So he's seen enough already to say that Georgia's got what it takes to get back to its 2021, 2022 levels of success. I mean, I'll say this, on doing the rewatch, which I always think, especially when you're watching it from the press box or on the field during a game at Sanford, it's important to go back and do some kind of rewatch to see if you miss anything, see what else you might get a second glance on, see certain rotations that they might have been going through, things like that. And, I don't want to make too sweeping of an observation after week 1, but I do think that Georgia has a much more championship caliber roster than I think that I expected them to, just based on what I've seen. I think that, the defensive front was swarming more and was probably faster than I was giving it credit for going into the season. That I was someone that was probably more critical of the depth and talent level across that defensive front, not at linebacker, but along that defensive line, just the inexperience. And I think that they showed that they were talented and highly touted for a reason across the board. Almost everyone made a play in that game. If you just name drop the guys that you think are going to be playmakers for Georgia in SEC play, I think all of them did something that you can look back on in that opener. And so I think that was really reaffirming. I think that they threw a lot of different things in the defensive backfield. So you don't really know what rotationally you should expect at defensive back necessarily once you get into SEC play. That was probably by design. That was probably treating it like this was, the third scrimmage in a row, more so than the Marshall game, at least in that position group. And I don't know exactly what we learned, but I think that the defense, I believe, will be better this season than it was a season ago. I think that it will have less errors this season than it had a season ago. And I don't know that I would have necessarily seen that before getting to watch them as much as I did against Marshall. Now, is it possible I'm knee-jerk reactioning too much to that? Yeah, absolutely. But I think that the defense is going to be able to take Georgia a little bit further this season than I thought it would. And I think that maybe a reassuring side of that is, I think a reason I feel that way is because the offense got the better side of the defense more often than not throughout fall camp. And so I think that if this Georgia offense is able to get after this Georgia defense in a way that it did in fall camp, should be looking pretty good. And fewer errors, Henry. Thanks for the grammatical correction there.
There you go. That's why we love recording this live. People will give us feedback, especially when we flub stuff. For me, Ben hit on a big thing. It's the defense. I thought, especially early, really like what Gabe Harris did. I think Gabe Harris has a chance to be a game wrecker, and I think we'll probably see a little bit more of that in that game against Austin Peay on Saturday. The linebackers, man, were just all over the place. Chris Cole made a bunch of plays. I know Justin Williams stood out as well. I think we talked about this a little bit on the Saturday episode, but I was impressed with the depth at running back. I came out of the game, and immediately after the game, I sort of felt like, well, I feel like I didn't see a ton of Nate Frazier. Well, he took 11 carries. I mean, he got a lot of work. Dwight Phillips Jr., really impressive. We'll hear from him with a clip from Tuesday's interviews here in a little bit. I really liked what he showed. Got a little bit of Bo Walker. I think we'll probably see more of Bo in this game on Saturday. Really like what they've got there. Rewatch, really something that caught my attention was just how well the tight ends blocked, which, of course, when you're playing Marshall, you should have the edge. But Dwight Phillips' touchdown run, I love the way they schemed it up. You had Oscar Delp out kind of offset, and he's sort of the lead blocker on that play. They move Lawson Lucky in motion. You basically have a convoy with your two top tight ends, and it really made things easy for Dwight Phillips Jr. Thought Gunnar Stockton played well. Really liked what Ryan Puglisi showed as well. I know that some folks on the Junkyard were kind of torn up about the way Puglisi looked compared to Gunnar. I thought Gunnar played fine. I thought, he had a good game. Was a little surprised he didn't take as many deep shots, but that kind of might have been by design. They didn't need to do that against Marshall, so they didn't. We'll be really interested to see the receivers and see who gets involved in the next game. And again, as important as these games are in the in-game reps, we all know that we're still paying attention to week 3 when they play Tennessee. We're going to learn a lot more about this team, but on the whole, they get out relatively healthy. Got to get Juan Gaston and Ernest Green healthy, which we'll talk a little bit more about what Kirby said on that front. But all in all, I think it was a pretty productive first game, and they should be feeling good. Kipp, what about you? Anything from the Marshall game you want to shout out?
Yeah, I mean, I still think the safety position and play is still a question mark. They were not tested by Marshall at all, so that you can't really glean anything from that. So that was a question coming into the season. It was one of the biggest questions. They rotated 4 guys in there. I think most of us were surprised when Kyron Jones got the start, but at the same time, he ended up, like 4th or 5th as far as the snaps when all was said and done. So he probably got rewarded for a good week of practice. Kirby Smart does that all the time. But establishing the run game and involving Gunnar in the run game was clearly the focus, and you saw that. And I think you saw them trying to establish tempo several times, which Mike Bobo he loves to do that. And the refs kind of got in the way of that a couple times reviewing the plays, but it's still something that interesting to see and see how well they're able to keep that going the rest of the season. You mentioned it, Jordan, with the tight ends, but overall with the wide receivers too, the perimeter run blocking is vastly improved through one game. And that was obviously a point of emphasis last season, was something that they all want to wipe the slate clean on multiple levels. But that was an area of improvement that you could tell that they took it upon themselves to get better in that area. I think if there was a good news, bad news situation from this game was, the good news, they went 3 for 3 on 4th down conversions. Bad news, he had to go for it on 4th down 3 times because he got stuffed at the line of scrimmage on your early downs. So I think that's kind of where that early, not going to say red flag, but an area for improvement this week is, not getting into that situation. I think one of the carryovers I saw from last year is they went 6 for 16 on 3rd down as far as Kirby Smart's concerned, he's never had a team until last season that was under 40% on third down conversion. And so you're right under there. Again, that's like 37.5%. You're kind of continuing that trend from last year. So that's really, you're going to have to improve in that area if you want to get back to playing, national championship level football. So that's really an area where they need to improve on. They need to work on all week is doing better on third down. And at the running back, it looks like you got 4 guys. You still want to say, even though that first game didn't really show it, you got Nate Frazier as your first running back, and it kind of seems like you got 2A, 2B, 2C between Cash Peanut and Chauncey Bowens. And I really think you look at the way Peanut played, Dwight Phillips Jr., he's got that, he showed that like laser vision. He has the best vision right now. And if you're going to play the hot hand, you got to find ways to get him, as many carries as you can get a running back who's not 190 pounds. And it might not be 20, but if you can get a guy like that 8 to 10 a game, I think you can find a lot of success as long as he's playing like that.
Yeah, you hit on a big stat that I wanted to throw out there, the third downs, 6 of 16. And, there was one specific moment where I remember Georgia had like a 3rd and 1, and they tried to run for it and get stuffed. And it's like, you can't do that against Marshall. You got to be able to get that extra yard. So I don't know if it's quite cause for concern yet, but those third downs, one of the big changes or drop-offs in play in 24 compared to 23, Georgia led the nation in third down conversion in 23 and then was like 77th, I think, in 24. So that's something to pay attention to. And when that was brought up last year, Kirby talked about those early downs. And you know what you do on most of those early downs? You run the football. So it kind of goes back to the conversation about Georgia needing to run the ball better. And I think that they took steps in the right direction in week 1, but we'll see if they can continue that in week 2. Before we turn our attention to Georgia playing Austin Peay on Saturday, we're going to go through some other week 1 thoughts. When we recorded this on Saturday, predictably, we spent a lot of time talking about Alabama and Florida State winning that game. Wanted to throw out a few other scores of interest, most of which happened after we recorded, just to get y'all's thoughts, anything y'all wanted to share. Number 9, LSU beat Clemson on the road 17-10. Looking through some of the other scores, Michigan takes care of New Mexico 34-17. Go check out that trick play that New Mexico was able to score on. That was at least some positive there for the Lobos. Ole Miss takes care of Georgia State 63-7. Sunday's games, Miami with a pretty impressive win over Notre Dame 27-24. South Carolina over Virginia Tech 24-11. And then North Carolina getting blown out by TCU on Monday night to end things. Kipp, I'll start with you. Any of those scores or outcomes stand out to you, or any other games from over the weekend that I didn't hit on right there?
I'd be remiss if I didn't start with the fact that I'm glad that Carson Beck was able to overcome being at a junior college last year and just left for dead between Greg McElroy on the broadcast and maybe a little bit of Carson after the game, the adversity that he had to deal with and not being able to call any of the plays at the line of scrimmage or, just not having any support last year. This is really kind of a rags to riches story for him. So kudos to him for, again, the success he had in the game. It did seem like they laid it a little thick on maybe what happened to him last season or, that SEC championship, that he led Georgia to. It's kind of a weird narrative where the fan base doesn't know what to think. And if you didn't know any better, you would think he got just run out of town. So it's an interesting dynamic and one that I don't know if we're going to get to see it in the postseason, but I mean, it sets up for, a crazy comparison just watching Miami and Georgia and how the season unfolds. It kind of just seemed like the Carson Beck that I knew overall in that game where, he's playing the short to intermediate field, getting the ball out quickly, a lot of checkdowns, but playing within his skill set. I'll be interested to see what happens whenever he has defenders in his face. When that Miami offensive line gets tested a little bit more. But yeah, a solid first game for him. And, a lot of people got like plenty of clips to run with and talk about with the former Georgia quarterback.
I'll say this. I don't know if, any receiver for Georgia last year could have come up with that touchdown catch that CJ Daniels had, because that's probably a pick, not only at Georgia, probably about 110, 115 other schools. That was a phenomenal catch right before halftime. And yeah, Carson Beck seemed pretty emotional after that one. And, I'll allow it with what he's been through as far as the injury and everything. But I did kind of think that they laid it on pretty thick, like Kipp said. Ben, any of these games stand out to you? Anything you want to shout out from week one?
Yeah, nothing from Carson Beck's performance really surprised me. It was just kind of what Carson Beck does, right? Like we talked about this for years with Carson Beck. Like sometimes people are hypercritical of him because he doesn't do anything exceptional or necessarily like out of the ordinary. But it's like he's gonna, he 200 yards and 2 touchdowns is a run-of-the-mill Carson Beck game. And quite frankly, I believe he's going to be doing that on Sundays. And even though he's not going to be doing anything exceptional or out of the ordinary, he's going to be going for 200 yards and a couple touchdowns on Sundays. And that's a lot of quarterbacks aren't doing stuff like that. And so that's kind of the Carson Beck story to me. I think I hadn't really thought about it, but like postseason football, Carson Beck versus Georgia is not out of the realm of possibility. And the storylines would be, I was just imagining Carson Beck coming back to Sanford Stadium for a first round playoff game. And I was having the visions of like how ugly that thing could get in Sanford. But, aside from that game, LSU surprised me. That was one of the early, Alabama, Florida State notwithstanding, that was probably one of the big time week one matchups where I thought it was going to go the other direction. I think that LSU has had a propensity to lose these games. They were on the road. I maybe am not as much of a believer in, not saying that I don't think Garrett Nussmeier is a good quarterback, but everyone's anointed him as like, the guy in college football. And I just want to see a little bit more of that. I think you could probably have said the same for Cade Klubnik going into that game as well. So great win for LSU. And it shows me that it's funny how week one games can make you start schedule looking like Alabama. I'm talking about how I think they're going to go 11-1 and lose to Georgia. And now I'm like, could Alabama lose 6 games, right? Like, what could happen there? And the funny thing about that is like, they could very easily still go 11-1, but they could also go 6-6. And we have no idea really what to expect, but that makes you change the way LSU's schedule looks and Florida's schedule looks when you start thinking about LSU and Texas. And it's interesting how week one unfolded. And, I think we're in store for a pretty exciting season just based on how week one went.
LSU is a good example to bring up there, Ben, because like preseason, I was kind of looking through and seeing if I thought they had a road to playing for the SEC. And one of my big holdups was that Alabama game. If I could pick that game over, I would feel pretty good about picking LSU just based on what we saw in week one.
I will say, I do think there's been some pendulum swinging going on with things, which is natural. People have offseason takes for months and months and months. And then week one sort of throws things in the face of some of those narratives. And I think people are overreacting to certain things. And the Alabama thing, I don't know. The Alabama thing's weird. I don't know that anybody saw that coming the way that it happened and what it could potentially mean for that team this year and that program moving forward. Like, it just sort of blindsided me, and that being something that we're now going to be hyper focused on for the entire season. But I just think that, there's Arch Manning, for instance, Texas, but there's a world where they're 9-1, 8-1 going to Athens, and they've beaten Florida. Like, they've got some good wins against Florida, some other good wins in conference play along the way. And then we're looking back at it, we're saying they have the ball on the road late in the game, down a touchdown against what could very well be the undefeated number one team in the country, defending national champs at the time that we're having this conversation. And that's going to be spun as a great result for Texas when it's all said and done, assuming that they do what they need to do moving forward. Now, again, I could be looking back 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, whenever it is that they play Florida and they've gone to Gainesville and lost to Florida, and maybe Texas is a little bit more vulnerable than I was thinking, much like the same that I feel about Alabama right now. But I do think that there are certain things that happened week one that people are way overreacting to. And I think Texas and Arch Manning is one of them. I don't even think Arch Manning played that bad of a game. Like when you put it in the context of it's his first career start and he is going on the road in Columbus against what I think very likely for the second year in a row could be the best defense in college football. It wasn't that bad. Were there some bad moments? Yes. Were there some good moments there in the fourth quarter that put them in? I mean, quite frankly, they went for it on the fourth down when they were down 14-0. He threw a great ball on the corner to Livingstone, and he didn't come down with it. Who knows? Maybe a year ago, Matthew Golden comes down with something like that. I mean, he did things in the fourth quarter that I think would have allowed them to win. I mean, even on that final drive, throws it to Ryan Wingo, drops it on that 3rd and 5, and it would have been a first down, extended the drive. Who knows what happens on the rest of it? And I'm not pointing fingers at Ryan Wingo because he's going to be exceptional too. But that just leads to my point where it's like they did things that were close enough. So I only say that because Texas is on Georgia's schedule. And I think Georgia will know what Texas is by the time Georgia's playing them. But I think people might have thought, oh, Texas isn't all that. Arch Manning kind of sucks. And I just don't think that's the way that the Texas season is going to play out.
I totally agree there. I mean, they were playing the defending national champs in Columbus. I will say that Ryan Wingo throw, that was behind. That was totally on Arch.
It was a little behind. It was a little high. Should have come down with it first down.
Noted Arch Manning defender Benjamin Wolk. He's got great quarterback takes. Just go and listen to some of our past episodes. Kipp, I did want to bring this up and see if you were in the same boat as me. You know, it's very easy to overreact to week one across the board for any team. One, are you as worried about the Bill Belichick era in North Carolina as a lot of people seem to be after that 48-14 loss? And two, Kipp, as a Falcons fan, did you enjoy it as much as I did? Because I was smiling ear to ear the whole time.
I mean, isn't this exactly what I said was going to happen when he got hired? We talked about how this has all the makings of a train wreck. And the announcers were a train wreck last night. When that first drive, it was like, you can't show the booth enough. It felt like a Chiefs game. They were just immediately going like, check out all the celebs that are, enjoying this. Like UNC is back. And then that was it. Like that was the last time you really saw the booth. Everyone left. The whole stadium was basically empty for, the last half of the game. And it was just, it was, if this was a boxing match, it would have been called like very early in the third quarter, if not at halftime, because there was no fight left. You could not rally the troops around it, and they got blown out as bad as you can get blown out in a prime time everyone's watching matchup. And everyone just kind of made this the storyline. They wanted to see what he was able to do, and for me, it was like, how can this? He's never done this before. You can't. There's a reason why it doesn't work out when you go from one level to the other, and vice versa. And I think we saw that. He just does not seem like he connected with this roster. They were not on the same page with him. And yeah, I think this is probably going to be like this all season. And it's just another reminder that you should not be the coach that takes over for Mac Brown. Charlie Strong had to learn it the hard way too. It's not an easy thing to do. But I do not see where, the roster didn't look terrible going into the year, but at the same time, I thought the TCU team looked fine on paper. It just did not look like they were going to be able to just go in there and name their score. And hats off to their admin. Their social media accounts have been on a heater for the last 24 hours, as they should be, because there were no storylines with TCU at all. And that's disrespect. And now Yeah, I think North Carolina's going to be looking for a new head coach sooner rather than later. I don't know. There are a lot of hot seats out there. I know Virginia Tech, obviously that tough loss to Shane Beamer. That's one that like just stings. He was, that was already the hot seat there. So I could see why, the Virginia Tech job, Britt Pry could be on the way out. But man, like I think you got to move. You got to move Belichick above some people. I mean, obviously above like Hugh Freeze, Scott Satterfield, Sam Pittman. I mean, he's got to be at the top of the list. And I think that job has to still be a pretty good job. I mean, like, I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic, but it was really tough to watch. But it was also really easy to watch because, man, like, standing the Falcons up, whatever happened behind closed doors with that job. I mean, I could not turn away. My wife was like, you want to watch Aliens Earth? And I was like, no, we're locked in. I want to see every single play, every single time they shoot to him on the sideline. We're watching the post-game presser. We're getting as much of this as we can. So, yeah, I mean, tough for the Tar Heel fan base, but for me and Bill Belichick, that was exactly how I would have scripted it up.
Yeah, TCU had to hear all about losing to Dion in his first game against Colorado, and I think they were pretty determined not to let that happen again. Ben, any thoughts on the Belichick thing at North Carolina?
I mean, I didn't know what to expect immediately. I was more in the camp of believing that Bill Belichick's a football guy that would be able to figure things out in the long term. I don't know if it could have been a bigger nightmare at the beginning. And I will also say, for those of us that might have at the time that he took the job defended him, I don't think any of us knew Miss Belichick's involvement in all of this thing. That's, I think, added some obstacles to his ability to be successful at North Carolina. But it's hard to envision a scenario at this point where that situation works out. I felt great I like the quarterback that he has committed in the 2026 recruiting class, Travis Burgess over at Grayson. I've been high on him for a while. He's just suffered a season-ending injury as well, which is not necessarily what you want to hear. If you're Belichick, you might be looking for that, freshman to come in and kind of build a program with that guy. I think that becomes a little bit more difficult with Travis Burgess' injury as well. So, I think his only path to success is finding the right guy at quarterback, and that's easier said than done.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and come back and focus on Georgia's Week 2 game against Austin Peay. Before we do that, go subscribe to Dawgs247.com. We still have our 75% off sale. It ends on Tuesday night. So if you are watching this live, you have until 11:59 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday night to sign up. If you're listening to the podcast, you better hop on it because it will be in the books before too long. Sign up, get ready for the entire football season. Georgia's still waiting for that first SEC game, and we'll be in the thick of all that. Men's basketball is right around the corner. I think it's a week or two before we start men's basketball interviews, getting ready for the Bulldogs in the 25-26 season. Before you know it, Georgia baseball will get going. In December, we'll be talking about Georgia football signing class, and Ben will have all the latest on recruiting there and where things stand. Ben, you want to do a little plug here for some of the recruiting intel you've had here lately?
Yeah, obviously Georgia's going to have big recruiting visitors weekends. Last weekend, coming out of Marshall, we've got stuff over at Dawgs 24/7 that I encourage you to check out there. Some updates on Jay Lamar, Georgia running back commit. We'll have more throughout the week too on some of the guys that were on campus last weekend. There will have some more guys on campus for the Austin Peay game. And then really from then moving forward, it'll be from a home recruiting standpoint, it will be all eyes on the Alabama game at the end of the month. So it's going to be a lot this month from a recruiting standpoint, especially as we get closer to that Alabama game, which is going to, the preliminary list that I've already got going for that Alabama game is pretty remarkable. And I think that it's only getting started.
You will not want to miss out on that. Well, we will take a quick break, come back, and talk a little bit about the Dogs versus the Govs. right, we turn our attention to Georgia's Week 2 game against Austin Peay, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be on ESPN Plus and SEC Network Plus. Two 1-0 teams, which I don't know that we necessarily expected that going into this. Obviously, Georgia takes care of business against Marshall, but Austin Peay goes to Murfreesboro and takes it to Middle Tennessee 34-14. Very impressive win for the Governors. I think I saw that's their first win over an FBS opponent since 1987. So that is pretty impressive stuff for the Austin Peay Governors. Want to get into a little bit of what Kirby Smart and some of the players had to share on Tuesday. We had our interviews on Tuesday, and Kirby, first off, a couple injury updates. Ernest Green and Juan Gaston. Kirby said that they are hopeful that they'll get them both back this week. I've heard some good things at this point about Juan Gaston, but understanding the competition, we still have to watch. They may decide out of an abundance of caution just to hold those guys out, so we'll watch there. Roderick Robinson, who I totally missed, did not get on the field in that game against Marshall. He's been dealing with a hamstring. Sounded like he could have gone on Saturday, but they decided, again, out of abundance of caution, not to play him. We'll see if he can get back out there. They are working their way back. Micah Morris has been wearing a club. Sounds like he's still going to be wearing that for a little bit longer. Kyron Jones, too. Besides that, Kirby, very complimentary of Austin Peay, what they did. I think he said that, they went up to MTSU and jumped on them. Pretty impressive. Their defense, I wanted to shout this out. MTSU had 153 total yards of offense. They didn't turn the ball over, but they just couldn't get anything going. 0 of 12 on third down. And, a little of that was probably Austin Peay, and a little bit of that was probably MTSU, but a good performance, no doubt, for Austin Peay to start the season. Got some clips loaded up that I wanted to share of Kirby. Some interesting talk, and I would encourage you all to either go to our YouTube, Dawgs 24/7, and watch Kirby's conversation, or go to Dawgs247.com. Ben has got the full transcript of what Kirby had to say, but I thought this was interesting. In that Georgia-Marshall game, Georgia had a shot at a shutout pretty, a few minutes into the fourth quarter, if I remember for sure. And looking at that, Kirby was asked, how big of a deal was that you guys weren't able to post the shutout? But I thought Kirby gave a pretty insightful answer about how much value that really has, and what it meant to get some younger guys out there, even if they did give up a touchdown.
Yeah, I learned a long time ago. I've never been into stats here. Like, we don't do that. We play more players when the game's in hand than probably anybody in the country. I think of those opportunities as development opportunities. It's why we've been really one of the better programs at turning players over in terms of what we put into the draft and lost early outs and having someone ready to go. I think that's number one, we develop and recruit. Number two, we practice our guys more as 2s and 3s. And number three, when they get an opportunity to go in the game, which we didn't last year, but in years past we put them in the game. If it costs us a shutout, then that's a great lesson learned. I'd much rather that kid cost me a shutout in that game than him cost me a touchdown a year later in an SEC game. And we just erred on that side.
I really felt like what Kirby said there, to me, just kind of sums up what you would expect from a head football coach. I mean, that he felt like, at the end of the day, the scores don't really mean that much. I mean, what's the difference in winning 45-7 versus 45-0? I don't think very much. So, Ben, I mean, what did you make of what he had to say there? To me, I thought he kind of hit the nail on the head there. It means more to get those guys out there, especially, Ben, if you remember that UMass game, it was sort of a situation where afterwards you could kind of tell Kirby was upset they weren't able to get more guys in the game.
Well, I definitely think it was a priority this season to be able to get him, or to be able to get those young guys more involved early in the year. And that just didn't, like he said, that just didn't really happen last season. And so I don't think he's going to get too caught up. I know he says, like, I learned a long time ago, I'm not too caught up in the stats. I do know they have certain metrics that they have as team goals that they're trying to stay underneath when it comes to points scored, yards allowed, yards per play, those types of things. So, I mean, I know he was probably being a little bit more dismissive of being stats oriented than he actually is. But I think that what he was referring to was when you're up 45-0, giving up a touchdown isn't the worst thing in the world if it's giving your guys learning opportunities that are young in your secondary. I mean, that was it was Rashawn Dinkins that was in coverage on the deep shot that got them in territory to be able to punch it in. And Rashawn Dinkins got to Georgia in June. So the fact that he's on the field as early as he is, I think is a positive thing for Georgia, a positive thing for Rashawn Dinkins, even if, Marshall was having some successful plays in those spots.
Yeah, and to me, you live with that. And like Kirby said, would you rather him make that mistake against Marshall, or what if, 5 or 6 weeks from now they're playing Florida and that guy gets thrown into the moment? And, we talked to some of the players that we got today, Ellis Robinson, along with Dwight Phillips Jr., just about how valuable these kind of reps are. And I think that there's real opportunity there. And I think that, Georgia was very wise about how they got the guys out there, and final score in a situation like that isn't really the biggest thing there. All right, this was a conversation. I'm really interested to see what you guys make of it and your opinion. The crowd on Saturday for the Marshall game was, I don't know if you would describe it as sparse, but there was definitely some open areas. It definitely was not a full house. Kirby was asked about it on Saturday, and the reporter was like, if you had thoughts on the turnout, because it looked like there was some open areas, and Kirby dodged it and was like, you said that, I didn't, and just kind of left it hanging there. Well, Kirby was asked on Tuesday about it. Is there anything that Georgia can do to maybe incentivize better attendance and to get those fans in the stands? And that's what Kirby had to say.
Incentivize? I don't know that you incentivize the turnout. It's not, I don't really believe in incentivizing things. I think it has to be a core DNA trait, a belief. When we sell things, it's, I will do this if you do this, and incentivize. I don't think that's great motivation. I think it's intrinsic in who you are. I think people should love to be at a Georgia home game because there's only so many of them. It's limited opportunities. It's the same thing about our players. We don't incentivize them to run to the ball by saying, we'll go up in your NIL if you run to the ball. You got to do it because you want to be great. You got to do it because you want to be different. And if our fans want to be great and different, then they'll do it.
I thought that was an interesting answer, and I've seen some conversation out of what he had to say on that, and I'll let each of you give your opinion. For me, I see different sides of the attendance equation. One, I understand that the prices have gone up. I can't imagine for a family of 4 what it would cost to get into a game, and you're including parking and you're including food, you're including all that. I understand that piece of it. But at the same time, I do think that there is a piece of this where you're talking about a fan base that has seen 2 national championships. I think that it does kind of mirror what happened at Alabama when we knew Nick Saban got after people. And I will say, for me, I take a little more issue to the crowd turnout for Marshall because that was the first game. That was week 1. It's been however long since Georgia's played between the hedges since that Georgia Tech game. Whereas this week, week 2, Austin Peay, this is the second week you're playing a cupcake game. I'm kind of more inclined to be like, look, if the crowd's, kind of lacking, I think that's totally understandable. So I kind of see both sides of it. And I know that, when Kirby has said things in the past, I think it's kind of ruffled some feathers, but I get what he's saying. I also think that at the end of the day, his job is to win football games. They've done their part and held up their end of the bargain, and they're expecting fans to come through and to fill the stands and show up on game day and cheer them on. Ben, what do you make just really about the entire conversation about the attendance on Saturday and just your take on it?
Well, a few thoughts on it. This is why we need to have more conference games. This is why we need to mandate that teams play good on out-of-conference opponents, because this type of thing is only this is a conversation we're only having when Georgia's playing Marshall and Austin Peay. No one's questioned over the last few years when Ole Miss came to town or Kentucky came to town for night games or Georgia Tech at Black Friday last year, there weren't conversations about whether Stanford Stadium was enough of an atmosphere or allowed enough, got a good enough turnout, right? So a big thing for me is the more compelling games that are on the football schedule, the more awesome environments there are going to be in Sanford Stadium. And that's not a defense of, saying, hey, the fan base doesn't need to show up, do a little bit better. We commented on it during the game. We had the view from the press box of people streaming out of to the bridge exit in the middle of the second quarter, early on in the second quarter. It's I get it. There's other things that people want to do in Athens. There's people that you want to see, places that you want to go. I think a lot of people take issue when they start talking about the cost of games and what it takes to actually get there and have your whole family. And that's all fine. I don't push back against any of that. But if you're there at a game and you're leaving in the middle of the second quarter, I think you can say hey, you could just stay at the game that you paid and organize your day around to be at. I don't think that that's a crazy thing to say. And that does happen a lot, probably more so in Athens because downtown Athens is awesome and people want to go and enjoy doing that as well. But when, I get it. We're going to have the same conversation after this one because Austin Peay is going to go the exact same way. It's going to be a mediocre turnout. And then there's going to be people streaming out of the game early on, assuming that Georgia's doing what it's supposed to be doing on the field. And then, Alabama will come to town at the end of the month and we'll stop having the conversation because it's going to be a crazy environment for a night atmosphere in Sanford Stadium. And that's just kind of the way that it goes. I think that Kirby knows at this point I didn't think he said anything outrageous. He got asked a question about it and he sort of said, if they want to be great and they want to be different, they'll be great and be different. If they don't, they don't. And it's not saying you're not. It's not saying you haven't been. It's not saying that I'm criticizing you for what the Marshall atmosphere was like or what the Austin Peay atmosphere is likely to be like. But I do think it is issuing a challenge to say hey, if you want to say that Sanford Stadium, if you want to get angry when people say Sanford Stadium's quiet, and if you want to get angry when anyone doesn't include Sanford Stadium or Georgia as one of the toughest places to play, it's just show it, especially when Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas come to town and Kentucky come to town this season. I don't think he's expecting Austin Peay to be the best Sanford Stadium's ever been, but I think that if he acknowledges his, displeasure subtly now, it should be right by the Alabama game at the end of the month. And that's ultimately all that really matters.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember which game it was, either last year or the year before. Maybe the Auburn game. Do y'all remember that he was really fired up about the crowd?
Don't remember. I mean, I've seen it from time to time, and fan bases get upset when he does it, but it's just look, people are critical of Sanford Stadium and how loud of an atmosphere it is. It has been an ongoing conversation for years, and Georgia fans tend to get sensitive about that, and then a season opener happens and it's just kind of a meh atmosphere, which again, if it wasn't Marshall, it would be a different story. If it was even if it was just a Kentucky season opener, if SEC started doing season openers with us in SEC play and Georgia's hosting Kentucky, that's going to be a crazy environment because it's an SEC game. It's the first one of the year. Marshall just sort of takes some of the juice out of it. And that's not Marshall's fault. That's just, again, if it were up to me, they'd play 12 SEC games or they'd play 11 SEC games and one out of conference. I've said nine SEC games, 2 out of conference power conference games, and then 1 either G5 or FCS game. You can make your choice. I think it's a 12-game schedule. You get 11 really compelling football games, and you're still helping some of these smaller market teams. But again, that's only if I got my way.
Yeah, well, we're making the push for Ben to be the college football commissioner. And yeah, it was after the Auburn game last year. Kirby said something like that was the first time he was really disappointed in the fans just because of the energy and what they brought to that home game. Kipp, what's your read on all this?
Well, I laugh at Kirby talking about not incentivizing anything because he is the coach that his program promoted 93K Day when he got the job. That first G Day, how important was it that they actually did that? They successfully had their 93K Day, and it fired off recruiting to another level. So you can incentivize your fan base to show out, knowing you're going to have recruits in town and knowing that this is kind of the cost of those kickoff games, the big time games being in Atlanta and not in Athens. I mean, this is what happens when you end up with Marshall instead of Oregon in Athens. They're not going to be as fired up about that. And so again, it's kind of in the middle where, does it matter? No. Georgia's got the longest home win streak now in the country. It's 32 games. If they still have it after Alabama, like Ben said, then again, no one's going to be talking about the Marshall or Austin Peay games, or the fact that Austin Peay's a 3:30 game when Kentucky's a noon game. Like, all these things aren't ideal for the season ticket holders or the students who are now not allowed to sell their tickets now. You've added in several factors that lead to not having the strongest environment for these games where you're expected to be up by 30 plus at halftime.
I meant to mention, too, on the injury updates, Kirby talked about Dalen Everett, the cornerback, dealing with an ankle injury, but it sounds like he's ramping back up, things trending in the right way there. Thought it was interesting, too. I'll have a story on this for Wednesday morning. Kirby kind of talking about process versus results. And he was talking about it specifically with Ellis Robinson and Daniel Harris, how they played at corner, that being Ellis's first start, and sort of, the results being okay, but the process needing some work. I thought it was really fascinating kind of hearing Kirby's perspective there. Speaking of Ellis, I had a clip here of him talking about what it was like adjusting to life in the SEC. He didn't play quite as much last year as I think a lot of us expected. Ellis gave a little bit of insight on what that was like, really more so on the physical perspective of what it takes to play in the SEC.
Different. SEC ball definitely different from high school. I say it took me a couple months to adjust to it, even from like practice aspects of it, really. So it was just really adjustment for me overall, just coming here.
Yeah, you talk about with Ellis, adjusting to life in the SEC, and he was banged up along the way too, and that didn't help. But I think that this year, having gone through last year, I think Ellis will be better served for it. And I think it's a situation too, when I look at Ellis, I'll be really interested to see when Dalen comes back, because I don't necessarily think that Dalen's return means that, that Ellis might not be starting anymore. I think that there is a real shot that we could see Ellis and Dalen as those starting cornerbacks whenever Dalen is back 100%. All right, I wanted to bring up another clip, and this one features our guy Ben Wolk talking to Dwight Phillips Jr. Dwight, who a speedster, his dad was an Olympic sprinter. Ben asked about who could keep up with Dwight Phillips as far as the current Georgia players. This is what Dwight had to say.
Can anyone on the team hang with you in a 100-meter dash, and if so, who would that be?
I mean, that's a good question. Probably KJ Bolden.
Ben, you kind of seemed a little surprised by that answer. One, were you surprised that KJ was the pick? And then two, just what were your impressions of Dwight? I think that he's getting kind of adjusted talking in front of cameras, but to me, he strikes me as a guy that's easy to root for.
Yeah, no, I mean, he had good energy about him when he came into the room. I think he's, sometimes guys, especially has he been up there before? That was the first time we've had him. Yeah. So, I mean, he, greeted the whole room before we got started asking him questions. Obviously his teammates and coaches seem to always be rooting for him as much or more as any other teammates that they might have, which I think says a lot about a guy. I was surprised by his answer on one hand, because I would not have expected KJ Bolden to be the choice. I think that that's interesting. I think that's, it's fascinating to know that, another fast guy kind of has that level of respect for KJ Bolden on the defensive side. Part of that's probably because he's been in open space a lot during fall camp, and KJ Bolden's been the one responsible for getting him to the ground without him taking it to the house. But what my real takeaway from that clip is that when it takes you 20 seconds to decide if there's anybody on the team that could hang with you in a 100-meter dash, there's nobody on the team that can hang with you in a 100-meter dash. And, humility struck there, and he had to say somebody's name. But I think that the obvious answer there was no, nobody can hang with Dwight Phillips in the 100-meter.
Kipp, on a serious note, what have been your impressions really just out of that first game of Dwight Phillips Jr. and what he brings to this backfield?
Like I said earlier, I think the vision. I think he might have the best vision as of right now. It's something that kind of comes and goes. It's just like, hitting in baseball. It's like when it looks like a beach ball, you can't miss. I think that's kind of where he looked like for the most part in that first game, to where like the holes just looked massive for him. And when you have the patience, when you know when to, just take it to the perimeter, or when to get north south, that's something where you kind of saw the difference between where he was and even where like Nate Frazier and the other running backs were. He just knew when to make moves, when to use the speed, showed a little bit of extra strength and the ability to make defenders miss in open space. That is the number one skill set that I think Kirby Smart and the coaching staff are going to be looking for who they give touches out of that backfield. Yeah, he's created a conversation of how many carries can Peanut handle in one game. And I think before, you thought going into the season, it was like he's a gadget player, maybe 5 or 6 touches in different scenarios. Now it's like, can he handle 10 to 15? And that can he handle 10 to 15 in SEC play? So I think, yeah, he's earned that conversation. And I think it's another aspect of where the fact that they do seem to have some depth in the backfield is going to help him. When you have Chauncey Bowens and Bo Walker coming in and then making defenders have to earn it on tackles, and then all of a sudden, boom, you got Dwight Phillips in that faster than anyone else on the Georgia roster, speed, just taking it to the perimeter, hands on your knees already before the snap. You could see a guy like that break off, long runs. And especially going into this Austin Peay game, or the last time these teams played, 2018, Demetrius Robinson was the leading rusher off one carry, that 70-plus yard run. This is where that scenario, I mean, if we're looking towards this game and who might break one, you have to, Dwight Phillips has to be the leader in the clubhouse by a good margin.
Yeah, he also mentioned that Will Muschamp is who he can thank for the Peanut nickname, though he did not know why exactly. That's what Coach Boom decided to call him. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Austin Peay game. We may have a preview episode on Thursday or Friday. It won't be a long one because it won't be with another beat writer. But I want to just get y'all's thoughts on what you think we'll see, and more importantly, what you want to see from Georgia in this game against Austin Peay. So I'll start with you, Ben. If there's any particular unit or group that you're watching on Saturday, what you want to see from Georgia out of this game against Austin Peay.
Well, really, and this is a little presumptuous in that I think Georgia will take care of business. I think this is the type of Georgia team that is going to take care of business when it's supposed to. And so I think it's going to allow a lot of guys to get on the field again, but I'm interested to see what freshmen get involved, because I don't know about you all, but I found it fascinating when Ethan Barbour was trotting out there with the first team to start the game. Now, again, how much does a starter rep matter versus just any snap in the Marshall game to Georgia coaches? I have no idea. Are they thinking of it as starters? Probably not. But Ethan Barbour being out there that early, really interesting. Elias Williams obviously gets involved in that same position group. You find that fascinating. I mean, J.J. Hanna and Elijah Griffin, both of their names have been mentioned a lot all fall camp long, and you sort of wonder, okay, is this just typical newcomer on the block buzz? In Elijah Griffin's case, I don't think so. I think he is going to be a staple part of this defensive line rotation, and honestly, J.J. Hanna, you can see it. You saw like the brief flashes of why people have been mentioning his name, but I think that Elijah Griffin, is going to be one of those types of guys. Georgia takes a shot to Talon Taylor, and I think too, there's a lot of pressure in Gunnar Stockton's face on that play, and he sort of throws it out to the left side. I think that if there wasn't that pressure there, he probably just keeps it in the middle of the field, and I think Talon might have had a step on the trailing defender as well, and so got Talon involved. Talon and KJ Bolden are the ones that were at Gunner for the punt team so far. So, Talon Taylor getting involved early on special teams. Thomas Blackshear, we've talked about Thomas Blackshear, contested catch type of threat. He gets one target and makes a really difficult catch in the middle of the field to extend a drive. I think that was with Ryan Puglisi as well. So, we've seen some freshmen already do some things. I expect to see even more on this upcoming Saturday, and I'm interested to see who it is and who might do certain things that establishes themselves in the full-time rotation. I think that Elijah Griffin already has. I'm interested to see who else might. Ethan Barbora was not someone that was on my radar, someone that could be in that conversation. That's really interesting. Bo Walker's a name that I didn't mention that I think he'll probably get some more touches on Saturday, just kind of based on the way Kirby Smart was talking about feeling like he wished that Bo had gotten some more chances during his press conference today.
Yeah, Bo was a guy that, to Ben's point, I think we'll see more of against Austin Peay. Kipp, what about you? What do you want to see from Georgia on Saturday? Anything in particular?
Well, the two things I mentioned earlier, improvement on third down, more downfield shots. Like I said, Marshall gave them that light box and they made the ground game an emphasis, maybe because of that. Maybe that's just what their plans were. But you want to see Gunner, have some more success down the field. And then really at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. I think Middle Tennessee State got to Austin Peay 3 sacks on 30 dropbacks. Can Georgia find similar or better success? And then at the same time, Austin Peay had like 5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss on Middle Tennessee. If we're seeing more Daniel Calhoun, if we're seeing more Bo Hewley on the right side of the offensive line overall, how does this group perform? Because this could be a group that could be who they go to Knoxville with. I mean, you need to know who your 5 guys are and who's going to do the best job protecting Gunner Stockton back there. So seeing again both sides of the line of scrimmage, improvement there, some progress there, knowing that you're going to learn a lot more about this team next week.
The only other group I would point out that I want to watch is the Jack linebacker, that outside linebacker. Coming out of Saturday, I don't know that one guy really stood out to me. I think as it stands, Quintavious Johnson, who started at outside linebacker, I think you'll see that. Though we saw Gabe Harris stand up some and play there, and I think you'll see more of that. Do one of those outside linebackers step up and really make an impression? Because, again, I think we're kind of running with Quintavious Johnson as the starter as things stand. Then the other thing, it was part of the conversation on Tuesday, can Georgia create some turnovers? In the past, even Georgia's best defenses are not big turnover makers. They wind up just forcing quick drives and punts more often than they do making interceptions or causing fumbles. They didn't have any turnovers in that Marshall game. Let's see if they can create some on Saturday against Austin Peay. All right, we'll get ready to wrap up this episode. I appreciate Kipp and Ben for popping on. Thanks to everyone who watched or listened to this live. Go to Dawgs247.com. Subscribe. Again, if you're watching this or listening to it on Tuesday, you still got time, but it is running out. 75% off. See, I got a timer going off because I know that the sale's going to end soon. 75% off, ends 11:59 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday night. Go sign up. You'll get all our recruiting intel, all of our team coverage for football. And then, like I mentioned earlier, not very far from basketball and baseball season getting here. So subscribe to the Junkyard Dawgcast, wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to Dawgs 24/7 on YouTube, on TikTok. Got some good content out of interviews on Tuesday, and we'll have some more stuff as we go forward. So we'll end the episode right there. For Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.